Before we start the video, please don't be a Baka and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I will assure you your little effort will help me a lot. Now back to the video. Late at night in a cafe, numerous ice creams and pastries of different flavors are placed on a table while Jian continues to eat them. Turning to Sungjae, he states that the ice cream there is really good, telling him to eat as much as he wants. In response, Sungjae asks if it is even alright, stating that this place is very expensive. Remembering that the assistant of Aquarius dropped her precious badge while running away from the shop, he takes it out, stating that it will do a lot. Showing the insignia to Sungjae, Jian states that it can be used as a card and even stores the skills of other divine beings. Looking at it, Sungjae recognizes it to be an Aquarius insignia, stating that it even functions as an ID card and can create problems for them later. However, Jian states that they should figure it out after eating and continues to enjoy the ice cream, while Sungjae keeps wondering if it is alright to eat. Just then, a person arrives from behind, asking Sungjae if he likes the ice cream there too. Hearing his voice, Sungjae quickly turns around and finds him to be the divine cadre captain, Choi Sunghyuk. Coming to the table, Sunghyuk asks if he can take a seat with them. Looking at him, Jian wonders if he is Sungjae's boss who was bothering him, while Sungjae stares at him in confusion. Turning to Jian, Sunghyuk greets him, asking if he is the person whom Sungjae mentioned earlier, and Jian agrees, inquiring why he is asking that. In response, Sunghyuk states that scouting out remarkable talents is also the job of a captain. Hearing that, Jian asks what he is going to bribe him with. Sunghyuk reveals that one of Li Jian's 8 divine artifacts will be going up for auction soon, asking him to take his time and think about the offer, making him surprised. After a while, he puts down the spoon, wondering if they will be going to auction his belongings, and smiles. Stating that he does not have anything to lose, Jian agrees to go with them and asks if the auction house is nearby. However, Sunghyuk reveals that it is not somewhere near because the divine artifact belongs to Li Jian and will be auctioned off at an appropriate location. Saying that, Sunghyuk reveals the location to be the greatest auction house in the world, towering 16,000 feet in the sky in the wealthy fortress city of Drachma. Meanwhile, in the great auction house at Drachma, Sophie sits on a chair, trembling with anxiety. Just then, someone holding a drink calls out to her, and she turns around. Beside her sits Steven, who states that if she is just going to shake in a corner, she can go away since she is making the drink taste bad. In response, Sophie makes a bad face, thinking that Steven is never going to learn any manners, but she will have to tolerate him. Considering that Steven is even stronger than Jian, she considers it to be the safest place if she stays beside him. After a while, Steven states that the weapon of Jian that was going to be auctioned is his, forbidding her to even think about selling it. While saying that, he starts to move out, prompting her to ask where he is going, but he replies that it is none of her business and tells her to sit there and wait. As she looks at him, she decides to stay calm, thinking that it is Drachma and, no matter who that person was, there is no way he could come into a place like that. Suddenly, her expression changes as she looks at Hugo passing in the corridor beside her. Considering this to be great timing for a valuable customer to have arrived, she smiles. Meanwhile, Hugo stands in the corridor and looks around, wondering where Jian is. He talks to himself, stating that he thought Jian would be there since there are so many expensive divine artifacts in that place. Just then, Sophie calls out to him from behind, asking if he has been well. Turning around, he recognizes her while she states that it is hard to get hold of him. She remarks that he was the face of the saints for a long time but has changed quite a lot. She sadder. Ises him, stating that he has very few disciples compared to the other saints, while he ignores her and tells her to go away, stating that he does not want to talk to her. Hearing this, Sophie asks if he is going to ignore her again, stating that he might lose his children just like he lost his wife, causing him to stop. She states that his wife is not dead yet but might die soon, asking what he can do while his family is falling apart due to an incompetent head like him. This causes Hugo to feel enraged, and his body gets engulfed with flames, leading to a blast in the building. Emerging from the flames, he states that he told her to go away while she stands coughing due to smoke. As he attempts to punch her, she holds his arm, telling him to hold his temper, and remarks that he has forgotten the truce they agreed upon 10 years ago. After that, she summons her aqua powers, stating that Hugo should be aware of his status as half a saint. Just then, someone calls out to her from behind, and she turns around, receiving a blow from Jian that causes her to crash to the ground. Surprised, Hugo looks at Jian while Jian asks what he is doing there. In response, Hugo states that he was worried about him, making him confused. Looking at him, Jian asks if Hugo likes him, and Hugo agrees, telling him not to even joke about that. Changing the topic, Jian looks at Sophie and wonders why she appears everywhere he goes. Thinking about Li Jian, the 13th saint, who is considered to be the strongest, Sophie trembles with fear. She remembers that she always hated him. In fact, she was scared of his face full of scars, his aggressive personality, and his cold eyes that always looked down upon her. She recalls that 20 years ago, on one particular day, Jian entered the Aquarius sanctuary despite being forbidden by the guards. With anger and aggressiveness in his eyes, he told them all to go away, causing them all to become scared. Just then, Sophie came there, asking how he dared to trespass into her place and telling him to leave. In response, he crashed her into one of the walls, causing her a lot of pain. After that, he asked if she really wanted to die. Confused, Sophie inquired why he was doing that. In response, he stated that he sent her to the rear to treat the people endangered by the calamities and asking what she was doing there. Venting his anger, he stated that their arms and legs looked like they had to be amputated, all because they were injured while protecting her. Dragging her along, Jian stated that she was the one who said she would treat them and told her to hurry up and save them. In response, Sophie stated that she does not care if people like them die, and they should be happy that they saved her for the sake of humanity. She asked if he was looking down on the saints, saying that they were already being blamed a lot by people and considered useless. Sophie mentioned that she does not even have a speck of thought to clean up whatever mess there is. Hearing that, Jian turned to her, shocked, while she told him to let go of her, saying that she had to get ready for her interview. In response, Jian let go of her hand while Sophie held her wrist, remarking on his grip being so hard. However, instead of leaving, he punched her and stated that he expected too much from a pest like her, who, instead of understanding human words, needed to be told through beating up. While she is remembering all that, she suddenly regains consciousness, finds Jian sitting in front of her, and feels shocked. She finds herself tied to a chair with Jian and Hugo in the room and lets out a loud scream. Turning to him, she demands to be released at that very moment, asking how he can do that to a saintess. Turning to Hugo, Jian remarks that she has not changed at all in the last 20 years, asking how her repertoire is still the same. Hearing that, she states in her head that things are not the same as 20 years ago. She decides to distribute acidic fluid on her hands to melt the rope that is binding her and starts doing that. She thinks that a restraint like this is useless and wishes that she could seek help from Stephen Marker. However, just then, Jian flicks her forehead, causing her immense pain. Looking at her, Jian states that her tricks are obvious from her expression. Suddenly, he feels a pain in his finger and finds that it has started to melt, feeling shocked. Smiling with excitement, Sophie calls him stupid and reveals that she has an acidic protection skill that activates whenever someone strikes her body. She states that this acid will start to melt his entire body, calling it the strongest protection skill of Aquarius. In response, Jian utilizes his recovery skill and heals his finger in an instant, stating that this is his strongest skill. Seeing that Sophie is consumed by shock, wondering what it was, considering it to be something greater than just a recovery skill. Meanwhile, Jian decides to go over everything that happened between them. After that, he starts with her claim to be his doctor, her attempt to attack him, and then the things she said to Hugo, announcing the number of hits she will receive for each of them. Hearing that, she asks him to wait, and he stops for a while and then states that the wait is over and goes ahead to hit her. While he is doing that, Hugo sits aside, enjoying his tea. Looking at them, Hugo realizes that Jian hits everyone equally regardless of their gender but also accepts the fact that they give him a reason to do that. Just then, Hugo notices that the divine status of Jian is increasing with every hit and wonders which divine being's divine status he is increasing. After launching a few hits, Jian stops, realizing that Sophie has fainted from the impact. Just then, he is informed that his divine status has been unlocked, but charging is required, making him confused. Wondering what divine status is, he demands an explanation, and the system explains it to him in detail. This makes him realize that he can gain divine status by hitting people, but he did not gain it when he hit Yang Wei because it was not unlocked at that time. This reveals to him the prospects of getting stronger. Just then, Hugo calls out to him, suggesting he ask Sophie about the dagger. However, Jian states that she cannot be the one to stab him, and he has also found someone to investigate the matter, so it is alright. Just then, Jian puts his hand in his pocket and takes out a mobile, checking the time while Hugo asks where he got the phone from, and Jian reveals that he borrowed it. Turning to Hugo, Jian states that he has to head to the auction house, telling him to deal with the rest and do whatever he wants with Sophie. After saying that, he moves out of the room, telling him that he will contact him when the auction is over. After he leaves, Hugo turns to Sophie and wonders what he should do with her. Just then, he hears someone's footsteps and turns to the door, thinking it is Jian. However, looking ahead of him, he feels surprised, wondering why it had to be him as he looks at Steven standing in front of him. Looking at Sophie tied to the chair and unconscious, Steven turns to Hugo, feeling enraged, and asks what he was doing there. After a small pause, Steven states that it has been a long time since he met Hugo. Saying that, he removes his glasses, revealing his eyes glowing with fierce intent, and smiles, stating that they are not in a state to share friendly greetings. Looking at him, Hugo asks why he is there, and Steven reveals that Aquarius asked him for an alliance. Looking at Sophie lying unconscious on the chair, he states that he had some business in Drachma, so he came along. After that, he turns to Hugo, stating that it is his turn to ask questions, and inquires what he is doing there. In response, Hugo states that he had business in the auction house, which is not related to him. Hearing that, Steven asks if he is also behind Li Jian's divine artifact that will be appearing in the auction, making him shocked. Looking at his expressions, Steven asks if he really did not know and states that it will be a price that he cannot even dream of affording, so there is no point in him knowing about it. In response, Hugo grins, asking if he is still in the habit of collecting the divine artifacts that Jian makes. Hugo reminds him that he never recognized Jian's strength and felt inferior to him, but kept collecting the divine artifacts made by him. Smiling, Hugo asks if he thinks doing that can make him stronger like Jian. In response, Steven summons his overwhelming powers, causing the room to be destroyed in an instant. Seeing that, Hugo also summons his powers, thinking that Steven always reacts this way whenever the discussion of Jian is brought up. With fierce intent in his eyes, Steven leaps up and quickly gets hold of Hugo's hand, telling him not to act big. Tightening his grasp, Steven reminds him that there is nothing in front of him, forbids him to discuss Jian, and twists his arm. With extreme anger in his eyes, Steven states that he is now even stronger than Li Jian. Just then, a person enters, informing Steven about a problem. He reveals that the disciples of Gemini are buying all of Li Jian's items, shocking him. Turning to Hugo, he lets go of his hand, stating that he does not have time to waste with him. With that, he begins to move away, stating that the auction holds more importance to him than Sophie, and since they are competitors, he does not need to look out for her to that extent. Turning back, Steven states that he will give him a piece of advice, telling him to tame his personality and stay low if he wants to live. In response, Hugo smiles, stating that he is very thankful for this advice. After Steven leaves, Hugo looks at Sophie, still lying unconscious, and then examines his injured hand. He feels disappointed, thinking that he is of no use. Meanwhile, in the auction house's VIP room, the host of the auction announces that the divine artifact has been bought by Gemini. After that, she announces a short break, after which the second session is supposed to start. During the break, Jian sits in the room, feeling happy and excited about acquiring another divine artifact. Observing him, Sunghyuk congratulates Jian and remarks that he can buy as many artifacts as he wants. In response, Jian thanks him for bringing him to the VIP room and allowing him to buy whatever he desires. However, Sunghyuk considers it to be alright since they want to have a talent like Jian, but Sungjae asks if it's really okay, stating that the divine artifacts seem to add up to billions of won. Sunghyuk insists that it's fine and asks if Sungjae can settle the alcohol bill, explaining that he didn't bring his corporate card. Hearing that, Sungjae thinks he has already borrowed a lot from him, but he cannot say anything since he is his superior and agrees. Just then, Jian intervenes, telling them not to worry about the bill and showing them a black card, stating that he has already paid for everything. Sunghyuk recognizes it as his own black card and checks his pockets, wondering when Jian took it. Meanwhile, Jian remarks that one should never let their subordinates pay, even if it is by mistake. In response, Sunghyuk says he was about to give Sungjae his card and thanks Jian for helping with the payment while feeling shocked and frustrated internally. However, considering Jian to be the person who killed the Spider Queen, Sunghyuk thinks that if he can make good use of him, whatever was just paid will mean nothing at all. So, he speaks up, stating that since they have had enough drinks, they should get to the actual topic. Sunghyuk expresses high regard for Jian and believes he has the potential to become an S rank or above. As he talks, Jian feels a mind-dominating fog surrounding him that others cannot see or feel, a magic that builds trust among others. Meanwhile, Sunghyuk continues, saying that Jian can even become the successor of their saint and one of the 10 stars. He envisions Jian having wealth, honor, and the strong authority of the great magician, Saint Ares. Bringing his hands forward, he tells Jian to hold them so that he can become the disciple of the great Ares. In response, Jian starts to laugh, making them both confused. Jian remarks that the entire day is full of funny experiences and states that they want him to become the servant of a poor divine being. Realizing that it has made Jian angry, Sunghyuk thinks that he needs to change the topic and states that Jian is mistaken about something. Just then, someone calls out, stating that they have bought the auction items that were purchased by them. Thinking of their timing as perfect, Sunghyuk turns to the door and tells them to come in. After a while, a woman enters holding a tray and congratulates them, presenting the purchased auction item along with an authenticity certificate, proving that it is Li Jian's divine artifact. Looking at the item, Sunghyuk asks if Jian bought Li Jian's divine relic, and Jian clarifies that Sunghyuk told him to buy anything he wanted, calling it a very useful artifact. Thinking that Steven is obsessed with Jian's artifacts and they should not mess with him, Sunghyuk states that someone else already owns the artifact and they should get a refund. However, just then, the doors of the room suddenly break, leaving them all bewildered, and Steven enters, asking who dared to lay their hands on his items. Recognizing Steven, Jian wonders if he is the person who was aiming for the divine artifacts. Meanwhile, Sunghyuk reaches Steven, apologizing and stating that the newcomer made a mistake without knowing much, and he is returning the items right away. Hearing that, Steven calls it alright, stating that the person only needs to admit it and return the things. In response, Sunghyuk thanks him, stating that he can take his time with the payment. Hearing that, Steven smiles, thinking it fortunate that he did not have to spend even a single penny on those items. He then turns to Sunghyuk and states that they cannot think of getting away after laying their hands on what was his. This makes Sunghyuk realize that Steven is planning on saving billions by using a mistake as an excuse. Just then, Jian speaks up, telling them to stop it. He states that he has won the item, and it belongs to him, not Steven, and if he wants it, they can sell it to him at a premium of 200 billion. Hearing that, Steven begins to laugh, stating that he wasn't expecting Gemini to have such bold people, while Sunghyuk wonders if Jian wants to die by doing that. Pushing Sunghyuk away, Steven states that he likes Jian, remarking that a person should be at least that courageous. After that, he reaches Jian and states that a meeting like this must be fate, and they should introduce themselves to each other. With a cruel smile, Steven states that whenever he meets someone he takes a liking to, he introduces himself very wildly. In response, Jian smiles and asks what he is talking about while thinking that his skills seem to have improved a tiny bit in 20 years. He thinks of Steven as someone who meets his expectations and has a battle spirit that cannot be compared with Aries or Aquarius. Looking at Steven's expressions, Jian realizes that he will not be satisfied until he rips someone apart. Just then, Steven tries to launch an attack while Jian stands still, amazed by his temper. A moment later, a bright light spreads in the room, followed by massive destruction, while Sungjae and Sunghyuk look in their direction, wondering if Jian is alright. Meanwhile, Steven stands, remarking that it was quite fun and stating that he can spend the rest of his life comfortably in a wheelchair. However, to his surprise, Jian smiles, asking if he is shaking the dust off his shoulder for him, and appears unharmed by the light. Feeling shocked that he is unscathed after the attack, Steven asks if he redirected the attack with teleport, and Jian remarks that he is still all brawn and no brain. Introducing the skill as rock wall break, Jian asks if he thinks the skill he made himself would work on him. Jian states that Steven begged him to teach him this skill, saying that he would use it to save people, but it looks like he is only using it to show off his power. Hearing that, Steven feels shocked and asks who he is. Just then, the break finishes, and the host appears once again, stating that they will begin the highlight of the auction in just a moment. Hearing that, Steven wonders if it is already time for that, while Jian sits down and looks at the screen, wondering if it is another divine artifact of his. Turning to Jian, Steven states that he has many things he wants to ask from him, but this auction is very important to him. Saying that, he walks away, telling Jian to take good care of the pendant and stating that he will come again after the auction is over. As he leaves the room, Sungjae comes to Jian, asking if he is alright. Meanwhile, Sunghyuk wonders how Jian dodged the attack, considering that redirecting a saint rank attack is impossible even for himself. Looking at Jian, he wonders who exactly he is. Just then, the host announces that the time has come for the highlight of the auction, and they will now reveal the divine artifact that they all have been waiting for. She reminds the audience of the Berlin Wolf incident that happened 24 years ago, which was about an unknown calamity that appeared on an island in Germany. She states that it was complete pandemonium that melted all weapons and armor, and even the 12 saints were unable to clear it. At that time, Li Jian appeared to defeat the calamity and used a particular artifact to do so. Hearing that, Stephen feels excited and happy, considering that the legendary weapon he has seen in his dreams is finally within his grasp. He remembers that 20 years ago, in Berlin, a search mission was going on above the island where the calamity appeared. Even after 4 days of Jian's entry, no one knew what was happening inside since Jian did not come out. The other saints were unable to enter the island despite trying because of the strong poison spread in the surroundings. Stephen also sat outside the island while his assistant informed him that this was the limit they could go to, and he wondered how Jian entered the place. Stephen wondered what difference Jian had from the other saints that enabled him to battle against the monsters while they could not even enter the place. While he was contemplating what he was lacking that Jian had, his assistant informed him that Jian was coming out of the place. In response, he looked up and became shocked, just like the others who were waiting for his arrival. In front of them stood Jian, holding a gigantic bone, leading them to realize that he had come out alive after defeating the calamity that everyone thought was impossible to defeat. Looking at him, the other saints remarked that all their achievements had been stolen by him again. In response, Stephen got up and started to walk away, telling his assistant to withdraw. Surprised, his assistant asked if he was not going to take his weapon, and he threw it away, stating that he does not need it and they can keep it if they want. Looking at Jian standing confidently among people, he stated that he has found something better and realized that what he is lacking compared to Jian is not ability but a weapon. While he is thinking about that, the host starts to pull the cloth covering the divine artifact and states that they will be revealing the strongest divine artifact used in the Berlin Wolf incident. While Sungjae and Sunghyuk stand waiting for it to be revealed, Jian stands with an expressionless face, feeling confused. Meanwhile, Stephen becomes increasingly excited, thinking that he is finally going to see the legendary weapon once again. Just then, the cloth is removed, and a huge bone is revealed, which Stephen considers to be the divine artifact that will make him the strongest. Meanwhile, outside the building, a strange-looking creature arrives and settles on the roof, smiling, stating that he can feel the power of Li Jian's divine artifact. After revealing the divine artifact, the big bone, the host asks who would want to be the owner of the greatest divine artifact, both history-wise and utility-wise. While Sungjae and Sunghyuk express their frustration at such a great divine artifact being taken away by Leo, Jian stands quietly, thinking that he was wondering what it was. Looking at the bone, he thinks that it was indeed something he used to use before. Thinking about something, he turns to Sungjae, trying to tell him something, but Sungjae refuses to listen out of frustration. Sunghyuk also reacts the same way and states that he will contact their headquarters and will not let them take such a valuable artifact, while Jian stands behind feeling frustrated. Meanwhile, the host initiates the auction at $1 million, and people begin raising their bids to acquire the item. As they do so, Jian starts receiving notifications about his increasing fame. Observing the event, Jian inquires why people are spending so much money on it, and Sungjae responds in frustration that it is because the item is a legendary weapon made by Jian himself. Sungjae emphasizes that although he might not get it, there is a reason why people do it, causing him to feel frustrated. Sungjae states that every item made by Jian is the best, and the people who have an interest in divine artifacts will do anything they can to get it. Pointing to Stephen, Sungjae remarks that he is a severe case. Sungjae reveals that Stephen has been collecting Jian's divine artifacts from all over the world, and due to his strength, people avoid challenging him when it comes to Jian's creations. However, he finds it unfortunate that Jian's divine artifacts end up in Stephen's collection, and he consoles himself by thinking that the profit goes into Jian's bank account. Upon hearing this, Jian considers it a good way to earn money and begins to enjoy the auction. When the bidding reaches $100 million, Stephen speaks up and offers $1 billion, leaving all others shocked. Coming towards the stage, Stephen states that he can even buy it for $10 billion if $1 billion is not enough. Hearing that, even the host feels shocked and turns to the other bidders, who all sit in silence, and asks if there is someone else to propose a higher bid. Hearing that, Sungjae asks Sunghyuk to do something, but he stands silent while Jian looks into the screen with interest. After a brief wait, the host decides to sell the item to Stephen for $1 billion and announces it. Hearing that, the workers of the building who are passing by discuss among themselves that it is an amount that people like them can never even dream of and hope for a twist in the situation. Suddenly, they notice a fearsome monster outside the building, warning them to take back their words. Meanwhile, inside the hall, Stephen is congratulated as the new owner of the item and is presented with the bone. As Steven holds the bone in his hands, with people appreciating him for the gesture, the wall of the hall suddenly begins to crack. Looking there, Steven wonders what is happening when the wall breaks and a monstrous creature enters, causing all the people to panic. Looking at the stage, the monster announces that it has finally found Li Jian's divine artifact. It then opens its mouth and rushes towards the stage, where Steven stands holding the glass box with the bone inside. As soon as the monster reaches Steven, it collides with him, causing the glass box to shatter and starting to wreak havoc. Soon after, massive blasts begin to erupt from the great auction hall, shaking the entire floating island. After some time, the smoke begins to dissipate, and Steven emerges from within, laughing hard. He states that this is the first time that he has been thankful for a calamity since it has allowed him to test the power of the divine artifact. However, the magic tower in the teleport zone starts falling apart, shocking both Steven and Sungjae. Suddenly, another massive blast erupts and destroys the tower, causing the rubble to fall upon the floating island. Realizing that the floating island might fall if the rubble continues, one of the people urges all the disciples to join forces and prevent disaster, to which they all agree. With that, all the disciples began to unleash their mana, directing it towards the falling debris to destroy it in the air. However, they soon realize that their efforts are futile, as the debris is too massive for them to obliterate. Just then, a power called the Fury of Apollo is unleashed, reducing all the pieces of debris to ashes in a single moment. Shocked by this incredible display of power, they all turn their gazes skyward to find the Sagittarius Saint, Hugo, hovering above them. Grateful for being saved, they all turn to him and thank him. Just then another formidable monster emerges, resembling a skeleton. As the monster looks up at Hugo, he is shocked to realize there is yet another one behind him. Just then, blood starts to drip down the monster's mouth and transform into huge tentacles that begin to ensnare people. Enraged by the situation, Hugo prepares to act, but before he can do anything, he notices that the monster Steven had defeated earlier has returned and is about to attack him. Left with no defense, Hugo feels shocked and helpless. As the monster launches its attack on Hugo, Jian intervenes, delivering a powerful kick that causes the monster immense agony. Meanwhile, Hugo begins to fall, and Jian calls out to him, instructing him to regain balance as the monster crashes to the ground. Once safely on the ground, Hugo expresses his gratitude to Jian for saving him, though Jian questions why Hugo is still so inexperienced in combat. Angry at Hugo for putting himself in danger, Jian asks why he is weaker than a production type like himself, stating that he feels so uneasy, while Hugo sits on the ground quietly. After a while, a verbal confrontation ensues between them, with Hugo defending that he did his best while Jian criticizes him, stating he was about to be killed by the calamity. Suddenly, they hear a loud scream and turn to see Steven approaching, angry at them for disrupting his divine artifact experience. Meanwhile, on the other side, the giant skeleton-like monster appears, roaring loudly. Turning to it, Jian realizes they have another monster to defeat. However, before they can make a move, Steven leaps up, ordering them not to interfere with his weapon's performance. Perplexed by Steven's behavior, Jian wonders why he has gone crazy again, and Hugo is left shocked. Meanwhile, Steven insists they step aside and comes down determined to defeat the monsters with his newly acquired weapon. Activating his royal skill, Steven ensnares all the people and one of the monsters within his shield, leaving only one monster outside to deal with. After that, he comes down and asks the rest of the people to wait inside the indestructible lightning storm for a moment. Facing the remaining monster, Steven declares that the stage is now set and says that the last time he used the big bone, he infused his own magical powers into it. However, this time he states that he wants to see what the big bone can do alone. The other disciples also stand behind him, encouraging and supporting him and acknowledging that he is the one who has surpassed Li Jian. Approaching the monster, Steven proclaims that it is time for it to pay the price for going berserk. With that, he lifts the bone into the air and strikes the monster's head with all his might. However, to his disappointment, the bone has no impact on the monster, leaving all the disciples surprised. Confused, Steven examines the bone closely, trying to understand why it doesn't work, while the monster remains fixated on him. Undeterred, Steven leaps into the air again and launches countless strikes on the monster's body, determined to find a way to defeat it. However, instead of harming the monster, the hits only enrage it. As a result, the monster lets out a loud roar and hits Steven with its claw, causing him to crash to the ground. Lying on the ground, Steven considers it strange, thinking that his attack really landed on the monster and wondering why the weapon is not working against it. Meanwhile, standing inside the shield of powerful lightning, Jian asks if they can get out, but Hugo states that since it is a royal skill, it would not be easy to do so. Hearing that, Jian feels enraged, vowing to make Steven pay for it after they get out, while Hugo feels annoyed at him for using a royal skill on them. Just then, Jian turns to Hugo, stating that they should take care of the monster inside the shield first. Looking at the people in front of the monster who are not turned into zombies, Jian asks if they are also calamities. However, Hugo tells him that they are the people whose minds were dominated by the calamity's ability. He says that the calamity might be thinking of using them as hostages so that they cannot attack it easily. Looking at the people coming towards them, Jian states that they will have to go head-on for this, prompting Hugo to ask if he has something in mind. However, Jian states that he does not have any plans and begins to walk forward, leaving Hugo shocked. While he is walking ahead, Hugo calls out to him, telling him to look forward, and he does so, finding a person leaping up to attack him. However, as soon as the person reaches him, Jian holds him by his head and begins to forcefully remove the blood ensnaring his body, leaving Hugo and the monster shocked. After he does this, the blood turns to its original liquid form, and the person loses consciousness. Turning to Hugo, Jian states that the person is now fine and that it is very easy for them to do it. Surprised, Hugo asks how he did that, and he replies that he did it with strength. Hearing that, Hugo lowers his head, stating that he will not be able to do it in that case. Hearing that, Jian states that he will take care of them all and has no expectations from a weak person like Hugo. Hearing that, Hugo smiles, stating that while Jian runs in, he will be covering him, and summons his ignition powers to back Jian up. Thus, with Hugo backing him up, Jian smiles and begins to move ahead, determined to defeat the deadly monster. While Hugo stands behind holding a bow made of fire, Jian walks ahead, wanting to finish the battle in an instant. Meanwhile, the monster and the hostages look at him with a worried expression. Just then, he leaps up into the air, wielding his powers, and lands in the middle of the hostages, removing the blood from their bodies with his powers. Seeing that, the monster feels shocked and throws more blood in Jian's direction, but he dodges while moving forward. Evading all the tentacles of blood, Jian keeps moving forward when he suddenly looks back and wonders if the attacks were directed at the people he just saved. Meanwhile, the blood reaches the people again. However, as soon as the tentacles begin to ensnare people once more, a huge blast of fire erupts, destroying them all. Behind them stands Hugo, with fierce intent in his eyes. Looking at him, Jian smiles, calling the counterattack a nice one, as expected of him. Growing even more confident as a result of his strong back support, Jian reaches near the monster and punches it so hard that it flies up in the air, experiencing immense agony. After that, its body suddenly catches fire, tearing it into countless pieces while Jian stands confidently under it. Just then, Hugo reaches for him, expressing his amusement at Jian ending the battle in an instant. Looking at the unconscious hostages lying on the ground, Jian states confidently that they will all be fine very soon. However, he suddenly notices his hand glowing and wonders what is happening. As he looks at his palm, countless notifications begin to emerge and inform him that his divine power has increased after successfully killing the calamity. This newfound awareness makes him realize that his battle instinct has been unlocked as a result of charging his divine power. Considering that he now has a chance, he decides to try out this new skill and accepts the option of using it. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, the Baka Senpai.